The little girl, now several months older, had grown into a young, confident member of the Apache village. Her daily routines were no longer a struggle but a source of pride. She helped younger children, carried out chores with efficiency, and assisted in preparing meals and tending animals. Her knowledge of the land and survival skills had expanded considerably, and she had begun to participate in small responsibilities that allowed her to contribute meaningfully to the community. One morning, the father called her aside with a serious expression. "Today you will help guide the scouts," he said. "It is time for you to apply everything you have learned." The girl's heart raced with excitement and apprehension. Though she had faced challenges before, this was the first task that required her to step into a leadership role alongside the warriors. She nodded, determination shining in her eyes, ready to prove that she could meet the expectations placed upon her. Accompanied by a small group of older children and a few adult warriors, she set out toward the outskirts of the village. The terrain was rough and unforgiving, dotted with jagged rocks and thorny shrubs. She carefully observed the signs of animals, the subtle changes in the wind, and the faint traces of movement left in the sand. Every lesson the father and the villagers had taught her came into play: patience, awareness, courage, and quick thinking. Her steps were deliberate, her eyes sharp, and her mind focused. As they progressed, the group encountered signs of danger-broken branches, footprints not native to the area, and the faint scent of strangers. The girl's pulse quickened, but she remembered the father's words: "Fear is natural, but it must not control your actions." She pointed out the evidence to the warriors, guiding them with calm precision. The adults exchanged approving glances, impressed by her observation and composure. In this moment, she realized that she had become more than a protected child. She was a capable contributor whose insights could benefit the entire village. Suddenly, they heard the distant sound of hooves pounding against the earth. The group froze, recognizing the approach of strangers. The girl's training kicked in immediately. She whispered instructions to the younger children, ensuring they stayed low and quiet while helping the warriors position themselves strategically. Though fear threatened to take hold, she drew strength from the father's lessons and the knowledge that the village's safety depended, in part, on her courage and awareness. The strangers appeared, armed and intent on causing harm. But the group, guided by the girl's careful observations and the warriors' expertise, managed to redirect them away from the village without direct confrontation. The girl's quick thinking and calm demeanor under pressure were pivotal in preventing disaster. She realized that courage was not merely about facing danger, but also about using intelligence, foresight, and cooperation to protect others. Returning to the village, the girl was met with quiet pride from the adults and admiration from her peers. She had successfully contributed to the safety of her community, demonstrating both bravery and leadership. The father embraced her, his voice filled with warmth and pride. "You have done well," he said. "You are becoming a strong, capable member of this tribe." The girl felt a deep sense of accomplishment and belonging, understanding that her growth was not just about survival, but about meaningful participation and responsibility. That evening, as the village gathered around the fire, the girl recounted the day's events to the mother figure and the other children. She spoke of the signs she had observed, the decisions she had helped make, and the lessons she had applied. Listening to her, the villagers saw a transformation. A child who had once been frightened and alone had become a courageous, capable, and respected member of the community. Her words were clear, her confidence evident, and her heart full of pride and love for the people who had nurtured her. Under the starlit desert sky, she reflected on her journey from a lost, frightened girl to a young leader within her adopted family. She realized that belonging meant more than safety. It meant trust, responsibility, and the opportunity to protect and guide others. The father, watching her quietly, felt a profound sense of fulfillment. She had grown into someone remarkable, a living testament to the strength of love, guidance, and family forged through compassion and courage. The desert sun rose over the village, casting golden light across the huts and pathways. The little girl, now older and far more confident, moved with purpose and ease through the familiar spaces she once had feared. She carried water to the central fire, guided younger children in their chores, and tended to the animals with skillful hands. The villagers no longer saw her as the frightened stranger who had arrived months before. They saw a young girl who embodied courage, resilience, and the wisdom of experience. The Apache father observed her quietly from a distance, pride swelling in his chest. He remembered the day she had arrived, trembling and alone, clutching her mother's shawl for comfort. The girl who now walked confidently among them was almost unrecognizable in her transformation. Yet, despite her growth, she still retained the gentle innocence that had first drawn his protection and care. It was a delicate balance of strength and tenderness, and it filled him with quiet satisfaction to see her flourish. That morning, he called her to his side. "Today," he said, "you will help lead the children through a lesson in tracking." His voice was calm, but carried the authority that came from experience. The girl's eyes brightened with excitement, a mix of anticipation and determination sparkling in them. She understood that leadership was not about power, but about guiding, teaching, and protecting those entrusted to her care. Accompanied by a group of children, she demonstrated patience and precision, showing them how to recognize animal tracks, observe subtle signs in the environment, and move quietly without disturbing the land. She encouraged them, corrected mistakes gently, and celebrated small successes with warmth. The father watched from nearby, noting how naturally she had stepped into this role. The children respected her guidance, trusting her decisions and responding to her encouragement with enthusiasm. In this, the girl had truly become a bridge between generations, a teacher, protector, and source of inspiration. Later, as the sun began its descent, the girl and the father sat together outside their hut, the sky painted in brilliant hues of orange and red. She leaned against him, a small gesture of affection that spoke volumes of trust and belonging. "I never thought I could feel safe again," she said softly. "But now, I feel like I truly belong." The father smiled, his hand resting on her shoulder. "You do belong," he replied, "not because of blood, but because of the love, courage, and heart you have shown. This village, your family, we are bound by choice, not chance." The mother figure joined them, wrapping a comforting arm around the girl. She kissed her forehead, whispering words of pride and affection. The girl felt a profound warmth, the culmination of months of care, teaching, and shared experience. She realized that family was not solely defined by origin, but by those who nurtured, protected, and loved her unconditionally. The village had become her home, its people her family, and their love her guiding light. Night fell, and the desert sky shimmered with stars. The girl sat by the fire, listening to the elders tell stories of ancestors, bravery, and spirit. She felt connected to the past, present, and future, understanding her place in a world that had once seemed frightening and cruel. The father's eyes lingered on her, filled with pride and quiet joy. She had endured danger, learned courage, embraced responsibility, and grown into a young member of the tribe whose presence strengthened everyone around. Her dot in the stillness of the desert night. The girl closed her eyes, wrapped in her mother's shawl and surrounded by the family she had found. She had journeyed from fear to belonging, from grief to love, and from vulnerability to strength. The bonds forged through patience, protection, and compassion were unbreakable, shaping not only her life but the lives of those who had welcomed her. The father and mother watched her sleep, hearts full, knowing that the child they had once sheltered was now a symbol of resilience and hope. In the vast desert, Beneath the endless sky, she had discovered the profound truth: home is not always where you are born, but where love, trust, and family choose to hold you. And in this village, she had found it completely. After the day of danger had passed, the village returned to its familiar rhythm, but something had shifted for the little girl. She no longer moved through the pathways with the tentative caution of a newcomer. Instead, her steps were lighter, her eyes bright with a newfound confidence. The attack had tested her courage, and though fear had touched her heart, she had survived and seen firsthand the unwavering protection of her new family. This realization sparked a deep sense of trust and belonging, replacing the anxiety that had haunted her since her flight from home. The Apache father observed her quietly as she assisted with morning chores. She fetched water from the creek with practiced precision, carried bundles of firewood without complaint, and tended to younger children with gentle care. Every action reflected not only growing skill but an emerging sense of responsibility. The father recognized that the girl was beginning to heal, not just from the physical hardship she had endured, but from the emotional wounds of loss and trauma. In her, he saw resilience tempered by innocence, a spirit that needed both guidance and affection to fully bloom. The mother figure played a central role in this process. She spent long afternoons teaching the girl the cultural practices of the tribe, weaving baskets, preparing traditional meals, and participating in ceremonial rituals. Beyond the practical skills, she shared stories of courage, honor, and empathy, helping the girl understand the values that bound the village together. The little girl listened with rapt attention, absorbing not only the instructions but the lessons woven within them. Slowly, she began to speak of her own memories, hesitating at first, but eventually sharing fragments of her past life, her parents, the moments before she had fled, and the sorrow she had carried in silence. The mother's gentle guidance allowed her grief to surface safely, transforming pain into stories that could be honored and remembered rather than hidden. The father, though less outwardly expressive, also nurtured this healing. He spent quiet moments with her, teaching patience, observation, and practical survival skills. He encouraged her to face small challenges like tracking animals or navigating the desert terrain, reinforcing her confidence while showing her that mistakes were part of learning. Through these experiences, she began to understand that courage was not just physical strength, but the willingness to confront fear, to trust in others, and to rely on both skill and intuition. The children of the village continued to welcome her wholeheartedly. Their games, once a source of apprehension, became arenas of laughter and learning. She taught them what she had learned, sharing her growing knowledge of the desert and the animals that lived within it. Her presence inspired them. Her courage and gentle spirit reminded them that even those who had faced immense hardship could thrive when nurtured with patience and love. The village began to see her not just as a guest or ward, but as a valued member of their community, a child whose bravery and curiosity enriched everyone around her. Evenings were now times of reflection and warmth. She would sit by the fire with the mother figure, listening to tales of ancestors and spirits, sometimes joining in with stories of her own experiences. The father would observe from nearby, proud yet quietly attentive, recognizing the subtle ways the girl was healing. She had begun to smile without hesitation, to sleep without fear, and to embrace her new life with both joy and determination. By the end of this period, the girl had undergone a profound transformation. She had faced danger, learned resilience, and discovered the meaning of trust and family. She understood that love and protection could be chosen and that courage was nurtured through experience, support, and the bonds forged with those who truly cared for her. The father's decision to shelter her, guided by compassion and instinct, had created a sanctuary in which she could flourish, under the starlit desert sky. Wrapped in the warmth of her mother figure and the safety of the village, the little girl finally allowed herself to feel fully at home. She had begun to heal, Her spirit strengthened, her heart opened, and her sense of belonging solidified. The father watched silently, knowing that this child, once lost and alone, had found not only protection but love, family, and the courage to embrace her future with hope. Months passed, and the little girl had transformed from a frightened, timid child into a confident, capable member of the Apache village. Her once tentative steps now carried a sense of purpose, and her laughter resonated freely among the huts and pathways. She had learned not only the practical skills of survival, carrying water, tending animals, weaving baskets, and preparing meals, but also the subtle lessons of wisdom, patience, and leadership that came from observing the adults around her. Each task she performed, each challenge she overcame, strengthened both her skills and her sense of belonging. The father watched with quiet pride. He had nurtured her trust and guided her growth, and now he saw the results. A young girl who could navigate the desert terrain, recognize signs of approaching danger, and care for others with empathy and determination. She had become more than just a child in need of protection. She was now a vital, respected member of the tribe. Even the other children looked up to her, inspired by her courage, resilience, and the way she remained gentle while standing firm in moments of uncertainty. Her bond with the mother figure deepened further. The woman became both mentor and confidant, guiding the girl in matters of culture, tradition, and personal growth. Together they tended to the young animals, wove intricate mats, and prepared communal meals. The mother taught her the significance of rituals and ceremonies, explaining how each act connected the people to the land, the ancestors, and each other. The little girl participated eagerly, learning to perform these rituals with reverence, understanding that she was now part of a larger story, one that stretched back through generations. Girls' curiosity and determination extended beyond the village boundaries. She accompanied older children and warriors on short journeys to gather food or check traps, absorbing the knowledge of the land like a sponge. She learned to track animals, identify edible plants, and understand the subtle signs of weather changes. These experiences gave her confidence, and she began to take initiative, offering solutions or assistance before being asked. The father observed these moments, his admiration growing. She was no longer a child defined by loss, but by her strength, intelligence, and courage. Evenings remained a time of reflection and storytelling. Around the fire, the girl shared tales of her own experiences, her voice steady and clear. She listened with rapt attention as elders recounted stories of bravery, honor, and spirit. Through these exchanges, she understood the depth of her own journey from a lost, frightened child to a member of a community that valued courage, loyalty, and compassion. She realized that belonging was not simply being safe, but contributing, learning, and nurturing the connections that made life meaningful. Her relationship with the father had matured as well. Once merely a protector, he now treated her as a daughter in every sense. He encouraged her decisions, praised her successes, and guided her through challenges with gentle wisdom. He recognized that she had become capable, independent, and brave, not in spite of her past, but because she had faced it and grown stronger. Their bond was a blend of respect, love, and mutual trust, a living example of what family could be when rooted in care and commitment rather than blood alone. By the end of this period, the little girl had fully embraced her role in the village. She laughed freely, worked diligently, and helped guide younger children with patience and empathy. The villagers looked upon her with respect, appreciating her resilience and the warmth she brought to the community. She had grown into a young member of the tribe who could face danger, nurture others, and contribute meaningfully to daily life. As night fell and the desert sky sparkled with stars, the girl sat beside her mother figure, her shawl draped loosely around her shoulders. She felt a profound sense of peace, understanding that her life had changed irrevocably, but for the better. The father watched from nearby, heart full, knowing that the child he had once rescued had become a strong, capable, and beloved part of the village. In her laughter, her courage, and her gentle spirit, he saw the future a testament to the power of love, protection, and belonging. Weeks passed, and the little girl had grown stronger, braver, and more at home in the village. Her laughter now rang through the pathways and huts, mingling with the sounds of other children playing and the daily rhythm of Apache life. The chores and lessons she once approached hesitantly were now handled with confidence. She fetched water without spilling a drop, carried bundles of firewood with steadier shoulders, and tended to younger children with a care that made the mother figure smile proudly. Her integration into the village was nearly complete, and even the shyest villagers could not help but admire her resilience. Yet, the father knew that true courage was not built solely through comfort and routine. It was time for her first real test, a challenge that would require her to rely on the skills she had learned and the courage that had been slowly growing within her. One afternoon, he approached her while the sun cast warm light across the desert. "Today," he said softly, "you will learn to face fear and take responsibility. There is a task for you." The girl's eyes widened, a mixture of excitement and apprehension shining in them. She trusted him completely, yet the weight of the unknown pressed against her small chest. He led her to a nearby enclosure where a young horse had become frightened and uncooperative. Its eyes darted nervously, and it stamped the ground, kicking up small clouds of dust. The father explained that the animal needed care, patience, and guidance. If handled correctly, the horse could be tamed. If mishandled, it could injure itself or others. He stood beside her, calm and watchful, letting her absorb the challenge without rushing her. "This is not just about the horse," he said gently. "It is about understanding, patience, and courage." The girl approached cautiously. Her heart pounded and her hands trembled, but she recalled every lesson: how to move calmly, how to communicate without startling, how to observe before acting. She stretched out her hand slowly, speaking softly to the horse, her voice barely above a whisper. The animal's ears twitched, and its breathing remained uneven, but it did not bolt. Encouraged, she stroked its neck and guided it gently toward the fence. The father's presence was steady, his hand hovering nearby, ready only to intervene if necessary. Minutes stretched into an eternity, but gradually the horse's tension eased. The girl's confidence grew with each small victory, each calm step forward. She began to understand that courage was not about rushing fearlessly into danger, but about maintaining control, patience, and awareness even when fear was present. By the time the sun began to dip toward the horizon, the horse was calm, obedient, and responsive to her gentle guidance. A triumphant smile spread across her face, and the father nodded in approval. This moment was more than a lesson in taming an animal. It was a test of her growing spirit and her ability to take responsibility. Afterward, she ran to the mother figure, breathless with excitement, telling her everything that had happened. She hugged her tightly, feeling the warmth and encouragement she had come to rely on. The father watched from a distance, pride and admiration swelling in his chest. This was the day he had hoped for, the day the girl would truly see her own strength, realize the courage that had been within her all along, and begin to understand her place within their family and the village. That night, as stars blanketed the desert sky, the girl lay wrapped in her mother's shawl, reflecting on the day's events. She understood now that courage and responsibility were intertwined, and that trust, both in herself and in those who cared for her, was the foundation of true strength. The father, sitting nearby, observed the quiet determination in her eyes, knowing that she had taken another step toward becoming not only a part of their family, but a confident, resilient young girl capable of facing whatever challenges the world might bring. And so, In the warmth of the village, surrounded by the protection, guidance, and love of her new family, the little girl discovered the profound truth that had been hidden from her for so long. She was not alone. She was capable, and she belonged. The tranquility of the village, which had become a comforting rhythm for the little girl, was shattered one morning when scouts returned with urgent news. A group of armed men, the same who had attacked her family, had been spotted moving closer to the village. Their intentions were clear. They were seeking the girl. The warning sent a ripple of tension through the community, a silent acknowledgement that danger could strike even in the most carefully protected sanctuary. The little girl, now accustomed to the routines and lessons of the village, felt her stomach twist with fear. Though she had learned courage, the idea of those men returning stirred memories of past terror. She clutched her shawl tightly, the familiar scent of her mother bringing a fragile sense of comfort. The Apache father, observing her unease, knelt beside her, placing a steady hand on her small shoulder. "Fear is natural," he said softly, "but we face it together. You are not alone." The girl nodded, drawing strength from his presence. The village immediately mobilized. Men and older boys fortified the perimeter with barriers and hidden vantage points. Scouts were sent to monitor the approaching group, while women prepared shelters and gathered provisions. The little girl was instructed to remain close to her mother figure, who taught her how to hide safely and move quietly if needed. She listened attentively, absorbing every detail, her eyes reflecting both anxiety and determination. This was no longer a lesson or game, it was real, and her survival depended on trust, courage, and the protection of her new family. As the sun climbed higher, dust clouds appeared on the horizon, signaling the arrival of the intruders. The Apache father positioned himself strategically, alert and ready, his gaze never leaving the approaching figures. The girl, though nervous, stayed close to the mother figure, her small hands gripping the shawl for reassurance. She had learned resilience and patience, and now she had to apply those lessons. She observed carefully, noting the father's calm demeanor, the coordinated movements of the villagers, and the way courage could be measured not only in strength but in strategy and presence of mind. When the intruders entered the village, they were met with organized resistance rather than panic. The warriors moved swiftly and silently, guiding the attackers away from the children while blocking all escape routes. The girl watched from her hiding place, heart pounding, but she no longer felt helpless. She understood that bravery was not the absence of fear, but acting with focus and purpose despite it. She whispered quietly to herself, "I am safe. They protect me," a mantra that steadied her trembling hands and racing heart. The confrontation was brief but intense. The intruders, unprepared for the defenders' knowledge of the terrain and their tactical precision, were forced to retreat. Dust and sand swirled in the wake of their departure as the village exhaled collectively. Relief washed over the little girl like a warm tide. She ran into the father's arms, burying her face in his chest, feeling the steady rhythm of protection and love. The mother figure wrapped her in a warm embrace, whispering soothing words that melted away the remnants of fear. That evening, the girl sat close to the fire, reflecting on the day's events. The terror she had faced earlier had transformed into understanding, a profound recognition that courage, community, and trust were intertwined. She realized that the father's protection was unwavering, that the mother's guidance was steadfast, and that the village, now fully her family, had come together to shield her from harm. Under the endless desert sky, stars twinkling like distant lanterns, the little girl finally felt a deep sense of security. She had faced real danger and emerged stronger, surrounded by those who loved and protected her. The father, watching her quietly, knew that the bonds forged through trust, courage, and shared challenges were unbreakable. And in that moment, it became clear. She was not just surviving, she was thriving, learning the profound meaning of family, protection, and resilience in a world that had once been so cruel. The desert wind carried an unusual tension that morning, rustling the dry grasses and bending the scrubby trees as though whispering a warning. The little girl had grown accustomed to the rhythm of village life, fetching water, helping with chores, laughing with the other children, but beneath her newfound joy lay a lingering unease. She had learned to hide her fears, but instinct still sharpened her senses. Something felt different. The Apache father, ever vigilant, had noticed it too. Scouts returning from the outskirts of the territory spoke of strangers seen moving through the desert trails, armed men who had been searching for a girl matching her description. The father's brow furrowed as he listened. The girl, unaware of the danger, was playing nearby, spinning in a circle with her shawl trailing behind her like a comet's tail. When he called her over, his voice was calm but carried authority. "Come inside, little one. Stay close." She hesitated for only a moment before obeying, sensing the gravity in his tone. Inside the hut, he explained carefully, though in terms she could understand, that there were people who meant harm, people who would take her away if given the chance. Her eyes widened in fear. She clutched the shawl, pressing it to her cheek, and whispered, "I don't want to go back. I want to stay with you." The father knelt before her, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You will not go back. We will protect you." His voice was firm, steady, and unwavering. In that moment, she felt a bond of safety she had never known before, a promise sealed not by words alone, but by the strength of his presence. Over the next hours, the village prepared quietly but efficiently. Men sharpened weapons, reinforced barriers, and stationed themselves at strategic points along the perimeter. The little girl and other children were instructed to stay close to the huts and away from open spaces. The Apache mother figure guided her through basic safety measures, teaching her how to recognize warning signs and where to hide if needed. The girl listened intently, absorbing every word, her fear tempered by the comfort of their protection. As afternoon approached, the tension reached its peak. Dust clouds appeared on the horizon, signaling the approach of the armed strangers. The warrior father moved decisively, positioning himself near the girl and the family members he vowed to protect. His eyes scanned the horizon, calculating every move, anticipating the enemy's intentions. He was prepared to do whatever was necessary, knowing that this girl who had come into his life almost by chance was now his responsibility, and he would not fail. When the intruders finally entered the village, they were met not by panic, but by calm, coordinated defense. The warrior and his men moved with precision, herding the attackers away from the children while blocking escape routes. The little girl hid close to the hut, her heart pounding, but she was no longer paralyzed by fear. She had seen courage and protection firsthand, and in a quiet, profound way, she understood that she was not alone. She whispered a silent prayer, clutching her mother's shawl as a talisman of strength and comfort. The confrontation was brief but intense. The warrior's strategy and knowledge of the terrain gave them the advantage. Within hours, the intruders were repelled, retreating into the desert with dust and sand swirling behind them. The village exhaled collectively, relief washing over everyone. The little girl ran to the father, throwing her arms around his waist. He lifted her gently, holding her close as the adrenaline of the day faded. That evening, the little girl sat near the fire, wrapped in her mother's shawl, feeling the warmth of safety and love in a way she never had before. She realized in her small heart that courage was not the absence of fear, but the presence of trust and protection. The father looked at her, pride and tenderness reflected in his eyes. She had endured, she had learned, and she had begun to understand the true meaning of family. Those who choose to protect, to guide, and to love, no matter the danger. The stars blinked above the desert sky as the village settled for the night. The little girl leaned against the Apache mother figure, and for the first time since her journey began, she felt completely secure. In the vast, unpredictable world around her, she had found home, courage, and belonging. And the father, watching them together, knew that nothing could break the bond they had begun to forge. The days that followed the attack were filled with both quiet relief and cautious vigilance. The little girl, once trembling at every noise, began to move through the village with a growing sense of confidence. Her footsteps were lighter, her laughter less tentative, and her eyes sparkled with curiosity rather than fear. Each morning, she rose with the sun, ready to learn and participate in the daily rhythms of Apache life. The chores that had once seemed intimidating, the fetching of water, carrying firewood, helping prepare meals, now gave her a sense of purpose and belonging. The Apache father watched her progress closely, his pride quietly swelling. He observed the way she mimicked the movements of his wife, the way she learned quickly from the other children, and the way she listened intently when taught the ways of the tribe. Her resilience amazed him. Though she had endured trauma no child should ever face, she approached each new challenge with determination, a spark that spoke to a courage deeper than mere survival. The father often found himself marveling at her spirit, realizing that family was not only about blood, it was about nurturing strength, compassion, and loyalty in one another. The girl's bond with the warrior's wife grew steadily. The woman became a mentor and mother figure, guiding her through the complexities of Apache customs and rituals. Together they prepared meals over the fire, weaving baskets and mats from reeds, tending to small livestock, and learning the language of the land. The girl was particularly fascinated by the stories told around the evening fire tales of ancestors, brave warriors, and the spirits that protected the tribe. She asked endless questions, and the mother figure answered with patience, weaving lessons of courage, honor, and compassion into every story. These sessions became the highlight of the girl's day, moments when she felt the love and safety she had lost long ago. The children of the village also welcomed her with open arms. Initially wary, they quickly recognized her bravery and gentle nature. They taught her games that involved climbing, running, and hiding, and the girl's laughter began to echo through the huts and pathways like a bright song. She discovered a joy she had not known in months, learning that play could coexist with survival and that community could provide warmth as well as protection. In turn, she inspired the other children with her courage and kindness, showing them that even the smallest among them could have a strength that mattered. Amidst these daily routines, the girl began to develop a deeper understanding of her place in the village. She learned which plants could be eaten, how to track small animals, and how to recognize the signs of approaching storms. She began to grasp the spiritual and cultural traditions of the tribe, participating in ceremonies and observing the rituals that connected the people to the land and their ancestors. Her small hands, once used only for clutching a shawl in fear, now worked with purpose and skill, weaving mats, helping with fires, and tending animals. Every success, every learned skill, was a quiet victory that strengthened her sense of belonging. Evenings were reserved for reflection and closeness. The little girl often sat beside the Apache mother figure, sharing stories of her past while listening to lessons about courage, resilience, and honor. The father would sit nearby, silently observing, a steady presence that reinforced her sense of security. She had begun to trust fully, understanding that she was no longer alone and that she was part of something greater than herself. The village had become her home, its people her family, and their protection her shield against the world. By the end of the 4th week, it was clear that the little girl had transformed. She had moved from fear and uncertainty to confidence and joy. She laughed freely, learned quickly, and began to contribute meaningfully to the life of the village. The father, who had once hesitated, now saw her as his own daughter. her resilience and courage reflecting the same qualities he valued in himself and his family. The girl had survived danger, adapted to a new culture, and embraced a community that had opened its arms to her fully. Under the vast, star-strewn desert sky, she sat beside her new mother figure, a sense of peace settling over her small shoulders. She had found love, belonging, and protection, a home that transcended bloodlines and loss. And as the father watched from a distance, pride and tenderness filling his heart, he knew that the bond they had begun to forge was unbreakable, a connection that would guide them all through whatever challenges lay ahead. Today I want to share with you a story. The sun had just begun its climb above the rugged desert horizon, casting long shadows across the dusty landscape. A small girl, no more than 6 or 7, stumbled along a worn path, her bare feet scraping against the hot sand. Her clothes were torn and caked with dirt, and her hands clutched a faded shawl close to her chest. The shawl smelled faintly of home, of a mother's warmth and comfort, but her home was gone, destroyed by a sudden violent attack that had left her orphaned and alone. Every sound, the wind rattling the branches, the distant caw of a bird made her flinch. Her wide, tear-streaked eyes darted around, searching for something familiar in a world that had suddenly become frighteningly strange. The Apache village lay ahead, its small huts arranged in a protective circle around a central fire. Children played nearby, their laughter echoing faintly over the sand, while women tended to daily chores and men returned from hunting. From the edge of the village, the girl watched silently, unsure whether she would be welcomed or sent away. Fear and exhaustion weighed heavily on her, yet a spark of hope kept her moving forward. She had been running for days, surviving on scraps of food and moments of stolen water, driven by the instinct to live, to find safety. Inside the village, a respected Apache warrior, known for both his skill in battle and his wisdom in guiding the tribe, noticed the small figure at the edge of the settlement. His eyes narrowed with cautious curiosity. Villagers whispered among themselves, pointing at the girl, questioning who she might be. Some urged the warrior to send her away. Strangers could be dangerous, but something in the child's trembling movements caught his attention. He felt a pull he could not ignore, a deep instinct telling him this was no ordinary visitor. The girl, sensing someone approaching, froze. She tightened her grip on the shawl, inhaling its familiar scent as if it could anchor her to safety. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she said words that cut through the desert heat and struck the warrior's heart. "She smells like Mama," she pointed, hesitantly but with certainty, toward his wife, who was nearby carrying a basket of water. The words, simple yet profound, carried with them a lifetime of longing, fear, and hope. The warrior felt an immediate connection, a stirring of empathy that overrode any caution or doubt. He took a slow, deliberate step forward. His deep, measured voice called gently, "It is safe here, little one." The girl hesitated but sensed no threat in his tone. She took a tentative step, then another, until she stood a few feet from him, her eyes wide with cautious trust. The villagers watched silently, some still unsure, but many quietly moved aside, giving space for what they instinctively knew was an important moment. His wife knelt to the girl's level, extending her hand and offering a soft smile. "You are safe," she said. The girl's lips quivered, and she allowed herself to be drawn toward the warmth and reassurance in the woman's gesture. Leaning into her for the first time in days, the girl felt the beginning of relief, a fragile sense that maybe, just maybe, she was no longer alone. The warrior observed quietly, pride and protectiveness swelling in his chest. He recognized the child's fear and grief, and he knew that providing shelter and care would require patience, courage, and wisdom. Yet he felt certain that turning her away was impossible. There was an unspoken understanding between him, his wife, and the girl. Family was not defined solely by blood, but by love, trust, and the courage to protect one another. As the sun climbed higher, casting its golden light over the village, the girl clutched her shawl one last time, inhaling the scent of safety and warmth. Her journey into this new life had begun. The warrior had made his choice, and the little girl had found her first glimmer of hope in a world that had been nothing but fear and loss. Here, among the Apache, a new family would form, bound not by chance, but by compassion, courage, and the simple, profound truth of a child's words. She smells like Mama. The morning sun stretched over the village, painting the desert in soft golds and reds. Birds chirped, and the faint scent of sage drifted through the air. The little girl sat near the edge of the central fire pit, her small hands clutching the shawl that still carried the faint scent of her mother. She had slept more soundly than she had in weeks, wrapped in the warmth and safety of the Apache home, but the world outside still felt enormous and uncertain. Every movement, the shuffle of villagers' feet, the call of distant animals, made her glance nervously around. She was still learning that the village, despite its unfamiliarity, was no longer a place of threat. The Apache father approached quietly, his tall frame casting a long shadow across the sand. His dark eyes, calm and watchful, met hers. "You must learn our ways," he said softly, kneeling so he could meet her at eye level. "This is your home now, and to live safely here, you must know how we live." The girl's lips trembled, unsure if she could do what he asked, yet she sensed no judgment in his voice, only a firm, patient guidance. He began with small lessons. First, he showed her how to collect water from the nearby creek, guiding her hands to steady the clay pot so she would not spill a single drop. Then he taught her how to carry a bundle of firewood, balancing it carefully across her small shoulders. She stumbled repeatedly, her tiny fingers blistered, her feet sore from walking on the rough sand, but the father never scolded her. Each failure was met with gentle correction, a patient smile, and encouragement to try again. Slowly, she began to gain confidence, discovering that mistakes were part of learning rather than punishment. In the afternoons, his wife took over, teaching the girl how to cook simple meals over the fire and care for the younger children in the village. She showed her how to weave small baskets from reeds and how to mend torn clothes. The girl listened carefully, her small hands eager to mimic the movements. She began to laugh again, softly at first, then with more abandon, especially when the other children joined in. They taught her how to run along the dirt paths, climb low trees, and play games that made her cheeks flush with excitement. Gradually, she felt herself being accepted by the tribe. Evenings were the quietest and most reflective time. The girl would sit close to the fire, staring into the flames as her mind wandered back to the life she had lost. She whispered her mother's name softly into the night, sometimes clutching the shawl so tightly it seemed she might never let go. The father understood this grief. He would sometimes sit beside her in silence, letting her know she was not alone. His presence was enough, steady, protective, and unwavering. She began to understand that being safe did not erase sorrow, but it allowed her to begin healing. By the end of the first week, the girl was no longer an outsider. She helped fetch water, carried wood, and even tended to the village's youngest children with surprising care. Her laughter rang alongside the other children, and her small hands learned to create baskets and other simple crafts. Though she still remembered her mother with longing, she had begun to see a new maternal figure in the warrior's wife, a woman who comforted her, guided her, and nurtured her without reservation. The phrase she had uttered on her first day, "She smells like Mama," no longer seemed a desperate plea, but a bridge that had allowed her to find love in a new place. The father watched quietly from a distance, pride swelling in his chest. The little girl, who had arrived trembling and wary, was transforming into a resilient, joyful presence. Her courage, curiosity, and gentle nature were not only helping her adapt, but were also bringing warmth to the entire household. The village was beginning to see her not just as a guest or a stranger, but as part of their family. As night fell and the stars began to twinkle overhead, the girl sat close to her new mother figure, feeling the steady warmth of family for the first time in months. The father glanced at them both, a sense of satisfaction settling over him. Trust had been earned, bonds had begun to form, and the foundation of belonging was being laid. In the desert, under the vast, endless sky, a little girl was learning that home could be found not only in the familiar, but in the protection, love, and care of those who chose to embrace her.